Good afternoon, everyone. It's not every day that we have so many friends come together. I have a lot to thank you for your business, for your support, and for your guidance that we've received as an organization for the last 20 years. Yes, it doesn't really occur as hard as it should, but we've been in the country for the last 20 years. We started in 1995 as a joint venture as Noble and Hewitt. Soon after, it was Hewitt Associates. And in October 2010, our merger with Aon coined Aon Hewitt. Again, thank you so much for being here. Best Employers has been synonymous to both our success and our growth in the country. Last year, when we came together, we celebrated 15th year of Best Employer in the country. It's been with the guidance and the support and the patronage that we've essentially got from our clients in this room and outside of this room, from our study partners, Business World, from our television partner, Bloomberg, and from my present and past colleagues. It stood the test of time, competition, and the challenges that we essentially see emerging from the VUCA world. And it's really with this tremendous amount of property that we've essentially created that backs me to welcome you to the 16th edition of Best Employers in India. You know, whenever you sit on a stage like this and you've got these lights glaring at you, I think it just reminds me that maybe every CEO feels this way, is where everybody can see him or her, but that individual cannot necessarily see what's really going on in the organization. And that's always a bit of a paradox that the top management is trying to resolve in many ways. What we've really tried to do as we were building out the theme for the 16th edition was less about looking back and a lot more about looking forward. And that's really where we coined the theme of Imagineering the 2020. It's not for the pundits and the economists that we know. They've never been able to accurately project what the future really is. So we're not necessarily going to be making the same mistake. But in many ways, with our clients here in the room, we will try and co-create and make some bold assumptions as we go through the proceedings of the day. If there's really been one thing which has remained vital constant to what we've essentially seen over the last 10, 15, 20 years evolve, which has transformed our lives, our businesses in many ways, the vital constant has really been technology. It's really been the digital invasion which has been evolving at a breakneck speed, permeated into the three most important relationships that we have in our business today. It would really be the relationship that we have with our customers, with our suppliers, and with our employees. If you just look at the evolution of technology from the printing press to the steam engine to today's world of internet, it's really been that vital constant which has overturned the status quo of the enterprises as we know them today. It was really after 50 years after the 50 years of invention of telephone, before half of American homes had one. It took 38 years for radio to get down to its 50 million listener mark. It took 1 year for Facebook to get down to a 6 million users. And in the next 5 years, they multiplied this number by 100 times. We are all aware of the famous voice and the texting messaging service of China, WeChat, which has 300 million active users on an average, spending more than 1.5 hours on that application every day. Very soon, it would be more expensive to advertise on WeChat than it would be on the television in China. It already has its users, which outnumbers the number of adults living in the US. So very clearly, accelerated innovation calls for accelerated adoption. Nearly after 2 years of the first launch of the iPhone in 2009, our developers had created 150,000 applications, 1.5 lakhs. The latest count that we have from 2015 is 1.5 million applications with 75 billion downloads, which is 10 per living human being in the planet. Today, when we gather in conferences like this, we don't necessarily make a reference to our conventional competitors. We are all just consumed with the disruption that we've essentially seen, all just in a matter of 2 to 3 years. And most widely used, spoken, and deliberated examples of businesses would really be Uber, Airbnb, Apple Pay. None of these businesses would really have a straight line definition to which sector do they really belong to. And I think when Mr. Anand Mahindra in the CM workshop almost raised a bit of an alarm for the OEMs to say, we don't know if futuristically we're going to be making cars for the consumers, like the one sitting in front of me, or we're literally going to be making half of a production that will get consumed by the Ola and the Ubers of the world, and the implication that it would have on our engineering, on how we essentially try and read and understand our customers. So very clearly, the kind of disruption that we've essentially seen is not going to be coming in from your conventional competitor, because I think that enterprise is grappling with quite the same number and the kind and the nature of issues as you are. It's really going to be about what we haven't really been able to put our finger on. And very soon would essentially have the power at a press of a button to reach out to over 1 million people spread across the world. So businesses are not necessarily going to flourish from a country or a geography to another country to another geography. They're literally going to be penetrating all of the boundaries as we've essentially known it for as long as we've really been existing in our respective businesses. In our research of the best employers, we have a terrific opportunity to go and understand how several CEOs are reflecting on many of these challenges more from a forward-looking perspective. We interview CHROs to understand how they're preparing for a pretty uncertain and ambiguous future that looms into their face. And what's the changing requirements, the needs, as the emerging demographics in an organization which is really being dictated by employees would essentially try and articulate. And in many ways, it's a bit of a convergence, as we would essentially call in our best employer methodology, between the intent, design, and the ultimate experience that you essentially provide to the people who've made a deliberate choice to come and work for you. And really, if I was to talk about the 3 themes that stood out in all of our interviews with some very remarkable organizations that participated and would ultimately be adjudged as best employers towards the end of the day today, were really around 3 elements. One was a big requirement that came in really from the boardroom, which is how is that futuristically we can make HR to be a lot more hard science function. How is that we can pack HR with data, with analytics, with predictability, so that we essentially know what kind of decision and what's going to be the consequence and what's the impact that we're likely to see from it. Unfortunately, over the last 18, 24 months, we've been doing more of undoing of what we've essentially done. We've got consumed in the debate of the bell curve, the performance ratings. I don't think that's really talking about the next big thing or the next innovation or what's really the employees are essentially asking us to do. It's more about the undoing of the evils that we essentially created at one point in time, rather than taking a step forward and doing something new. The second really that stood out was the larger risk and the return equation of HR. Simply because it sits on the liability side, sometimes we become a little bit more oblivious to try and understand the return on investment that we're essentially getting onto what I see as the single largest transactional element of cost of running any business, whether that is an industrial corporation or a services-led business. Would you ever imagine a marketing function signing off $1 million check in a marketing campaign without having any information on what the customer really prefers, wants, what are the insights into that segment that we're going to be producing that product or service for? But we do continue to sign on many of those large investments which are people-related without having any longitudinal research on what's the preference of an employee. Maybe the future would really be for us to do a bit of a KYC conversation on our employees, which is really where we invest and not assume what our employees really want. And lastly, with this entire digital invasion, how would it fundamentally change HR the way we know it today? Clearly, the digital is breaking the silos. It's blurring the boundaries between HR and business, between customer application and enterprise application, across operational hierarchical levels in an organization, across work and life. Fundamentally, it will become a lot more complicated for organizations to really articulate an organizational culture that will essentially bind a highly distributed and a networked organization in tomorrow's world. We're already seeing that, and we'll have several organizations who come and talk about their challenges or maybe one or two ways that they've essentially been able to get their arms around a problem that I'm trying to articulate. And what is that one distinctive element that will remain unique to you as an enterprise when you're not necessarily going to be having employees that will check in at 9 a.m. and check out at 6 p.m. when you won't really have the physical proximity that we essentially have at this point in time? I fundamentally believe that before HR tries to address the reskilling for the larger business, they would have to address the reskilling for the HR function in many ways. It's not that I have all the answers and we've kind of figured this out. It's really our opportunity to try and co-create. And as I said, maybe by the end of the day, we would have created enough and more of intellectual capital for us to ponder, reflect, and maybe have a reasonably confident peep into what the future really holds for us from an HR and a people standpoint. And I guess for that, during the day, we've got some very eminent leaders coming in from industry, organizations who've done something which is truly distinctive, which they are extremely proud of. And the reason why we essentially call best employers, and we only essentially have few number of organizations that classify to be best employers, is because much of this expertise and wisdom is not what we have seen is widespread. And the reason why we get a room full like the one that we have here at this point in time is because everybody has an intent to learn and grow and do something different when we get back to our offices tomorrow and then start looking at some kind of an application in that sense. And I will have our Aon Hewitt colleagues come and speak a lot more about the research and the perspectives that we've essentially been able to collate around the best employers, which has been on, as I said, for the last 16 years, and several other research that we essentially continue to do through the year. So it's really for me to hand it over to people who have the answers as opposed to constantly just setting up the context and maybe making some of you a little bit more nervous. But I thank you for coming over, making it special for us, and more importantly, making it special for organizations that we acknowledge as winners in the evening today. So thank you so much, and have a great day.